Morning, everyone. Everybody's talking about genocide. Genocide is the word of the week, I guess, this week. And here's Senator Frum asking questions in the Senate. And this is a big deal, everyone. So here we're going to listen.
On June 14th of 2016, he stated, "We feel that determinations of genocide need to be done by objective measures and through proper research on the international stage. We will not trivialize the importance of the word genocide by not respecting formal engagements around that word." Also on June 14th of 2016, he said, "We do not feel that politicians should be weighing in on this first and foremost. Determinations of genocide need to be made in an objective, responsible way. That is exactly what we have formally requested the international authorities to weigh in on." Senator Harder, why did the government change its position on the definition of genocide?
Senator Harder.
The government does not.
Says that he accepted the findings of genocide in the Missing and Murdered Women's report. So it seems that he has changed his definition. But let me ask you about something that former Foreign Affairs Minister Stéphane Dion said in June 2016. He said that about genocide, that the determination should be first a legal one completed by a competent court and not a political one. Do you agree with Minister Dion?
Senator Harder.
It is not for me to agree or disagree with a former minister of the government and now an ambassador. It is for me to answer questions of the Honourable Senate with respect to the government's position. Let me say that the government's position on genocide and the consequences of genocide is in accord with international law, that the comments made with respect to the recent report were carefully chosen and should be acknowledged as such.
So that's interesting. And in the tweet, Senator Frum says, why can't Justin Trudeau settle on a single definition for genocide? ISIS, no. Canada, yes. And that's referencing Justin Trudeau's no vote for declaring ISIS as committing a genocide against Yazidis. And here's Andrew Scheer defending free speech, and go with me on this, we'll get there. Andrew Scheer says, quote, "Canada's Conservatives will always stand up for freedom, democracy, and human rights wherever these fundamental values are under attack. I join Chinese Canadians and Chinese people around the world to remember the victims of the Tiananmen Square." My statement here. And we're going to read the statement too, because it's fun. And so this is the Honorable Andrew Scheer. All right, for me, released June 4th. This is a few days ago. And he says, the Honorable Andrew Scheer, leader of Canada's Conservatives, issues the following statement on the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Quote, "Today, Canadians of Chinese heritage join Chinese people around the world to remember the victims who were horrifically attacked at Beijing's Tiananmen Square on June 4th, 1989. Quote, "After weeks of peaceful demonstrations in Tiananmen Square, which means Gate of Heavenly Peace, military troops marched and opened fire on the crowd of unarmed civilians, killing hundreds, possibly thousands of people. Thousands of survivors were arrested, and dozens of others were executed for their participation in the demonstrations, which were thereby suppressed. The violent crackdown on Chinese people peacefully expressing their views by Communist Party rulers is deeply troubling. 30 years later, many Chinese citizens are still persecuted for their efforts to speak out or even commemorate the victims of the 1989 Tiananmen protests, including the relatives of those that were killed. Quote, "I believe that the right to speak freely as well as the right to free assembly and association are inherent human rights and fundamental to any peaceful society. I encourage everyone to remember the victims of the human rights violations that occurred in Tiananmen Square 30 years ago. By publicly acknowledging a difficult past, nations can move towards a more prosperous and harmonious future by firmly resolving to never again let these atrocities happen. I hope that the memory of these events will lead to peace, mutual respect, and recognition of everyone's right to their freedom and dignity. Canada's Conservatives will always speak out against injustices that take place around the world, standing for freedom, democracy, and human rights wherever these fundamental values are under attack. On behalf of Canada's Conservatives, I join all Canadians of Chinese heritage and Chinese people around the world to remember the victims of Tiananmen Square." And on the same day, well, maybe a day later, but on the same day as June 4th, when that was being released, Mr. Bernier was the only one defending Mr. Scheer's MP for speaking out freely in the Justice Committee on online hate speech, about online hate, that the Christchurch massacre and the manifesto had been posted on Facebook. So he came prepared to his committee meeting, and he defended himself against a witness who implied that these people seek out, that all of these people who commit atrocities, are influenced by conservative people. And Mr. Cooper said that's not true. Here's the Christchurch Manifesto. Here are his own words denouncing conservatism. And that has been, well, Maxime Bernier is tweeting, quote, Tories, that's Andrew Scheer and his Tories, the Conservative Party, silence their MP Michael Cooper, remove him from the Justice Committee, let the Liberals and the NDP erase what he said from the minutes, and then remove participant from CTV panel after that topic is added. That's the type of leadership you can expect from Andrew Scheer. And the duplicity of all of this, too, right? And Mr. Bernier is linking to the Mackenzie Gray tweeting, today on CTV Power Play, the Conservatives pulled their MP from a weekly scheduled roundtable, or MPs panel, after my Power Play colleagues added MP Michael Cooper reading the Christchurch Terror Manifesto at the Justice Committee as a topic. This matters, right? On one hand, you say, I stand for free speech and believe it's important for a free society. And on the other hand, you whip your MPs to not vote or vote for the silencing and the removal of history from the official record. And then when that topic is brought up to be discussed on television, you say, nope, not our MPs. Is that who you want as Prime Minister? Holy cow. Holy cow. Okay, moving on. Here is Maxime Bernier tweeting, quote, globally, there is no clear evidence of trends and patterns in extreme events, such as droughts, hurricanes, and floods. Some regions experience more, some less, and some no trend. Limitations of data and inconsistency in patterns prevent confident claims one way or another. And we're going to look at this Financial Post in a minute after I read the rest of these Twitter thread. The continued claim of such a link is misinformation employed for political and rhetorical purposes. Powerful people get away with it because so few people know what the numbers show. Many scientists who know better remain silent. And the few who push back against the propaganda, such as Roger Pielke, I'm sorry, I've got that wrong and I don't know how to say it, so I'm just going to go with that, find themselves on the receiving end of the abuse and career-threatening attacks, even though they have all the science in their corner. Something has gotten scary and extreme, but it isn't the weather. And here's this Financial Post article. And here's the tweet. It says, Ross McKittrick says, this scientist proved climate change isn't causing extreme weather, so politicians attacked. And yeah, it's interesting. So here we go. It says, while members of the media may nod along to such claims, the evidence paints a different story. Roger Pielke Jr. is a scientist at the University of Colorado in Boulder who, up until a few years ago, did world-leading research on climate change and extreme weather. He found convincing evidence that climate change was not leading to higher rates of weather-related damage worldwide once you correct for increased population and wealth. He also helped convene major academic panels to survey the evidence and communicate the near-unanimous scientific consensus on this topic to policymakers. For his efforts, Pielke was subjected to a vicious, well-funded smear campaign backed by, among others, the Obama White House and leading Democratic congressmen, culminating in his decision in 2015 to quit the field. A year ago, Pielke told the story to an audience at the University of Minnesota. His presentation was recently circulated on Twitter with so much misinformation nowadays about supposed climate emergencies, it's worth reviewing carefully. And I've got a couple of links for you, but the first link is here, and the other one is a YouTube video. I've never seen this one before, but I'm only a few minutes in. But I've read the story because I've prepared for the video here. But it's interesting, really interesting. It's worth your 15, 20 minutes to watch the video. I watch it in double time, and it takes you like 10. So anyway, here we go, back to the article. Sorry. Pielke's public presentation begins with a recounting of his rise and fall in the field. As a young researcher in tropical storms and climate-related damages, he reached the pinnacle of the academic community and helped organize the so-called Hockenhammer Consensus Statement, named after the German town where 32 of the leading scientists in the field gathered in 2006 to sort out the evidence. They concluded that trends towards rising climate damages were mainly due to increased population and economic activity in the path of storms, and that it was not currently possible to determine the portion of damage attributed to greenhouse gases, and that they didn't expect that situation to change in the near future. Shortly thereafter, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, released its 2007 report, largely agreeing with the Hockenhammer consensus, while cherry-picking one unpublished study and highlighting it in the summary for policymakers that suggested a link between greenhouse gases and storm-related damages. But the author of that study, who just happened to be the same IPCC lead author who injected it into the report, later admitted his claim was incorrect, and when the study was finally published, denied the connection. In 2012, the IPCC special report on extreme weather came out and echoed the Hockenhammer consensus, concluding that once you adjust for population growth and economic changes, there is no statistical correlation between climate change and measures of weather-related damage. In 2013, Pielke testified to the United States Congress and relayed the IPCC findings. Shortly thereafter, Obama's science advisor, John Holdren, accused him of misleading Congress and launched a lengthy but ill-informed attack on Pielke, which prompted congressional Democrats to open an investigation into Pielke's sources of funding, which quickly fizzled amid benign conclusions. Meanwhile, heavily funded left-wing groups succeeded in getting him fired from popular internet news platform. In 2015, Pielke quit the climate field. Yeah. So where did the science end up? In the second half of his talk, Pielke reviews the science as found in the most recent 2013 IPCC assessment report, in the 2018 U.S. National Climate Assessment, the most up-to-date scientific data and literature. Nothing substantial has changed. Globally, there's no clear evidence of trends and patterns in extreme events such as droughts, hurricanes, and floods. Some regions experience more, some less, and some no trend. Limitations of data and inconsistencies in patterns prevent confident claims about global trends one way or the other. There's no trend in the U.S. hurricane landfall frequency or intensity. If anything, the past 50 years has been relatively quiet. There's no trend in hurricane-related flooding in the U.S., nor is there evidence of an increase in floods globally. Since 1965, more parts of the U.S. have seen a decrease in flooding than have seen an increase. And from 1940 to today, flood damage as a percentage of GDP has fallen to less than 0.05% per year from about 0.2%, which is a big drop. And it goes... And on it goes. There's no trend in U.S. tornado damage. In fact, 2012 to 2017 was below average. There's no trend in global droughts. I just want to point out that this is contradictory, right? There's no trend in U.S. tornado damage. In fact, it's below average. Well, if it's below average, that's a trend. Oh, anyway, sorry. There's no trend in global droughts. Cold snaps in the U.S. are down, but unexpectedly, so are heat waves. The bottom line is there's no solid connection between climate change and the major indicators of extreme weather, despite Trudeau's claims to the contrary. The continual claim of such a link is misinformation employed for political and rhetorical purposes. Powerful people get away with it because so few people know what the numbers show. Many scientists who know better remain silent, and the few who push back against the propaganda, such as Roger Pielke Jr., find themselves on the receiving end of abuse and career-threatening attacks. And even though they have all the science in their corner, something has gotten scary and extreme, but it isn't the weather. And I would agree with that. Here is the plan to succeed with Andrew Scheer. Okay, so we're changing topics now. I find this take on climate change interesting. I'm glad stuff like this is getting printed. I'm glad stuff like this is getting tweeted by potential leaders, because there are serious questions. And there are serious questions about our human practices that we've enabled because of choices we made. In the 1980s, we brought the blue box in, and that gave social license for soft drink companies and all sorts of other food companies to have single-use plastics. This clearly isn't working because we're shipping it to China, and China's going great, tossing it in the ocean, and that's creating a garbage patch. That is a problem, and something we could actually solve. We could do something. We could say, hey, this will cost this much to switch back. And sorry, guys, we need to do it to save the ocean, right? Why aren't we doing stuff like that? Instead, it's this, well, I mean, for anybody who's been watching my show for a while, look up my climate challenge. Watch my graphs. Those graphs show what the temperature is around Canada. It's certainly, if that's the rate, if Canada is warming at twice the rate which CBC News is reporting, then, and if you look at my graphs, the warming is nil. It's very flat all across Canada. So if that's the rate of warming, well, we've got a lot longer to wait for anything to happen. It's very interesting, all of this rhetoric surrounding it. So changing gears now, talking about Andrew Scheer. Somebody pointed out yesterday on my channel, Andrew Scheer's YouTube channel doesn't allow comments. because the comments are like a dumpster fire, right? But I find that so interesting. Allow the dumpster fire. That's how you learn, right? That's how you get better. That's how you put out something that people are interested in, right? I use the comments, and people have talked about my sound volume and their levels and stuff, and right to criticize me. Sure. You should be open to hearing that criticism, Conservative Party of Canada and Andrew Scheer. Really, I mean, like, I have comments fully open on my personal channel, and I have my comments open on this channel too. So I find it so interesting, right? Where are the comments, Andrew Scheer? Where are the comments? It's so weird, right? Take it. Open the comments up. Listen to what people have to say. Is this how you're going to govern? Oh, right. Yeah. You stand for free speech right up until they say something that New Zealand made illegal. Whew, how dare you? Because, those liberals and those conservatives said that's bad, right? Whew, Andrew Scheer, way to lead. Okay, here's Andrew Scheer's tweet for the same thing, and I'll show you what the comments look like here. It says, Canada is at a turning point. Together we will usher in a new era of opportunity, of prosperity, and of strength. Yes, and here's the comments, right? The first one is, I cannot follow a weak man. Sorry, Trudeau has more balls than you, and he is a fake feminist. I don't know if Dustin's voting for Trudeau or just saying I'm not voting for Scheer. But the comments are kind of largely that. And it's a lot of liberal attacks too. Like, this is like, you're not in a poor enough neighborhood, right? Like, you're not Canadian enough because I live in a poor neighborhood and that doesn't look like my neighborhood. And so I just think that's interesting, right? And so the attacks are coming from the right, that he's not conservative enough, and the left, that he's, the second coming of a totalitarian dictator. And for whatever reason, they're totally missing Trudeau. I don't know. This is back to Roger Pielke, and this is the YouTube link I'll leave in the description. I think it's interesting. I think the fact that people can say 99% of scientists agree that this is happening, and people who won't look at these conversations between these learned people, these people who know what they're talking about, and who say it's not happening. Or if it is happening, these are the reasons that the expense is increasing. It's not climate change. It's the fact that there's a higher density, higher apartment buildings, more people in a smaller place, and thereby more people to get hurt with a smaller disaster, right? A smaller geographical disaster. A tornado, if it hits a house, will kill fewer people than if it hits an apartment building, right? As a bad analogy. But that's essentially what he's saying. And that makes perfect sense. And man, I wish we had some people who were willing to talk sense and instead of deplatform anybody who disagrees with them. Incredible. We live in incredibly, incredibly scary times. And there are a lot of parallels to the 1930s. And I mean, wow. So thanks for watching, everybody. This is getting long again, so goodness me. Have a wonderful day. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca. And thank you again for watching.